start by knowing you have three brands, Tamara Leisure, O by Tamara, and Lilac. These cater to different segments, luxury, business, and premium. So can you tell us how is it performing post-pandemic?
Thank you for having me. And we have three brands. So the Tamara Resorts is our luxury resort brand, and then O by Tamara is upscale business, and Lilac is mid-segment. During the pandemic, we had this really interesting dynamic in that when the resorts, when the luxury leisure hotels were open, they did phenomenally well because people had this really pent-up, they were just an absolute desire to get out into nature, into open spaces, and have those sort of pampered feelings that they were not able to have at home during those times. And of course, the business hotels and the mid-segment hotels suffered quite a lot. The coming out of the pandemic, I think what we've seen is sort of a balancing of all of this, right? So we've seen that there's certainly a resurgence in the business and the mid-segment. They're doing actually very, very well. We're seeing a lot of MICE traffic. We're seeing a lot of business tourism, people having meetings in person, of course, but also, for instance, crew picking up, airline crews, for instance, like coming through, things like that. So all of that sort of, what was not happening in the business world, you're seeing that coming back, and also you're seeing, the resurgence of big events. So you're seeing, big weddings, everything.
Is corporate travel a big part of this?
In business, right. So in our business, in O by Tamara and in Lilac, business travel is very much part of the, the main, the main business. And so there, of course, that corporate travel has made a big difference. And even if you look beyond just stay, if you look at our other sort of options as well, food and beverage, all of that has really picked up. We were doing, of course, a lot of delivery, things like that during the pandemic, but coming out of it, you see everyone wanting to be out and about and, in restaurants with people much more now than we did before.
And the luxury segment, especially for the vacations, family.
So the luxury segment, I think the leisure segment has seen a little bit of a rebalancing, let's say, right? So we had very, very high occupancies when the pandemic was on, if we were able to be open, right? So this property, for instance, was shut for 5 months nearly during, in that 2020 phase. And so, of course, during that time, there's zero business, but what happened is the other, 7 months of the year that we were open, we were fairly packed. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that our brand is one that people had a lot of trust in, right? That we were taking care of proper health guidelines, people were trained well, all of that. And so we saw that during that time, there was this huge increase in terms of leisure travel for those months. Currently, right, so currently what I would say is that there is a little bit of a dulling, slightly, I would say, in that segment. And the reasons for that, in the luxury leisure segment, in leisure. And the reasons for that are, are several. One is because I think now the options are much wider, right? Before you were going to destinations that were within driving distance. And luckily for our organization, our resorts were in South India, in areas where people were able to come. We had major metropolitan cities that were located where people were able to come and be in our properties. Now those same people are able to travel a much wider net. International travel has opened up significantly, so you see a lot of people going abroad for their leisure travel. There's still, I think it's still doing very, very well, but I think from sort of this very heavy traffic that we were getting, it has sort of moderated a bit, and you're seeing.
Segment is the one that's performing the best right now.
Business is performing very, very well.
What made you choose sustainability so proactively?
I don't know if it was one thing. I don't think it was one moment or anything like that. I think for me, it was almost like this very obvious thing. Like if you were starting a business, you should be conscious of your impact, right? And businesses will always have a positive impact in economy, but then there's also, typically there is another sort of impact that you have to be aware of. That's in an area which is very eco-sensitive. It's a 184-acre coffee plantation with significant amounts of forest land on that property. And so as we were creating it, there was really this deep sense of a commitment that we made to ourselves to say that we were going to keep this property in such a way that guests could really enjoy it the way that we were enjoying it before the construction started or while the construction was going on, right? So we were seeing wildlife coming through. You still see elephants coming through that property. You still see, wild boars. You still see snakes sometimes,
What is the most, the challenge that you face while you try to incorporate sustainability as a core practice in your business?
I think, sustainability is one of those things where you have to have a very holistic approach to it. If you look at it very singularly and you look at it from, immediate return, immediate gratification, that doesn't work, right? So if you're thinking of, like, for instance, a solar project, right? You have to consider that there is an expense, there is effort that goes into it, there is an ROI, and that ROI is not 1 year. It's typically something like 3 to 5 years. And so you have to be willing to take on that project and say that we're going to see this pan out over that long of a timeline. So if you look at it from a very short-term perspective, it doesn't work. And so to get everyone, all the stakeholders into that mindset can be very challenging because the industry was not built in that way, right? And there at least you can see a measurable, tangible, monetary ROI. There are many projects where it's not that clear along. And so that can be quite difficult, right? To really convince somebody that you are part of the story and you, even in that little way, every meal that you have on property, you can make a difference. That's something which is a little bit trickier to get your mind around. And so there's a lot of training that needs to happen around it.
Could you just take us through some of the particular challenges, challenging the traditional hospitality services?
I think we use a lot more than most organizations do, and we're very adamant about building transparency and fairness with the use of technology. That's not common. That's actually,
That's not common in the industry.
It's not common in the industry. I think most of the ways in which technology has been approached in the industry is that it's thinking about what can be put in front of the guest, the perspective of how much can you automate on the back end, right? So for instance, we've developed systems for HR wherein all of the HR documentation is in a single place. It's transparent. You can do all of your, for instance, salary comparisons. You can do all of your data analysis around your manpower. All of that is in the system, and it is made transparent to everybody. So you can look at exit interviews. Now, one of the things we launched last week, in fact, was to automate the exit interviews. So now, if somebody in leadership leaves, anybody, not my direct reportee even, I look at their exit interview and I see, like, what happened here, like, why is this person leaving, or what is going on, and that's a level of transparency which hasn't existed in most of this industry. Purchase is another place where I'm doing quite a lot, and we're already seeing a lot of savings related to that. So we're bringing in a lot of those, the contractual agreements, bringing in a lot of the rate comparisons between, for instance, one location to another, one state to another, doing all of that using technology so that you can actually optimize your cost.
Built out on transparency, which is not much practiced traditionally in the hotel industry,
right?
Hospitality industry.
It's not that it's not practiced. I think we've really taken it another level. Yeah. So like another great example. So on anybody's phone, anybody in the organization, if they have a phone, they can get into our app. We have a specific app meant for for all the Tamarites. They are able to put in a maintenance request. They can report a grievance. They can put in customer preference. Anybody who's staying on the property, if they know the preference, they can put it in. If they receive an appreciation from a guest, they're able to put that in.